Welcome, everybody, to Freelance Writing Direct. I'm your host, Estelle Erasmus, the author of Writing That Gets Noticed, Find Your Voice, Become a Better Storyteller, Get Published, which was named by Poets and Writers a best book for writers. Every week, I speak with novelists, with authors, with writers of every niche to talk about their tips, their tricks, their strategies, and how the sauce is made, including creative advice. I'll talk about essays and articles and share my own experience from 3 decades of publishing. So join me every week and grow your business and build your craft with Freelance Writing Direct. And don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes. And follow along on Substack, where I share special clips for subscribers only at estelleserasmus.substack.com. Welcome, everybody, to this episode of Freelance Writing Direct. I'm your host, Estelle Erasmus, and today I'm so happy to be doing a coaching episode with Pamela M. McBride. And let me tell you a little bit about Pamela. She's an award-winning freelance writer with hundreds of published articles on career management, leadership development, diversity and inclusion, military life, health and wellness, culture, and lifestyle topics. She is a contributing author to Sisters from AARP, and her work has appeared in Essence Magazine, Black Enterprise Magazine, Upscale Magazine, Military Families Magazine, and Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marine Corps Times. Pamela co-authored the Mocha Manual to Military Life, a savvy guide for wives, girlfriends, and female service members, and Work It Girl, the Black Woman's Guide to Professional Success. She's an honoree at the 2025 Black Authors Festival and serves on the Armed Services Arts Partnership Alumni Board. And you can learn more at her website, PamelaMcBrideOnline.com, which will be in the show notes. And welcome, Pamela, to the program.
Thank you so much, Estelle.
So I love having coaching episodes with people who have been entrenched in publishing for years, because I feel it's really easy to help an emerging writer. You give them a few tips and they're off and running. But it's more of a challenge, and it's more fulfilling to me to help somebody who's really been at it for a long time, as you have been. And do you want to say a little bit about how we got connected?
Sure. Well, I've been following you through social media for a few years, and I saw recently on your Substack that you had published a TED Talk, and I listened to it, and there were a few things on there, and I thought, that's a great perspective. There's a couple of things I'm going to do as a result of it, and I put that in the comments, and that's where it came from. But I've also read your book, Writing That Gets Noticed. When I say read, I probably have written in it more, more than anything else. I'm big on writing notes in the books. But also, again, I've been following you for a while, you and a few other of my author friends, and seeing some of the courses that you were teaching and all those things like that.
Thank you. And yes, I remember. So you commented on my Substack. I thought, ooh, she would be perfect to have on a coaching episode. And so I'm so glad that you're here. And let's just jump into it. So, what is your first challenge that you've been dealing with?
Yes. So, one of the things that is interesting about all of this for me is that writing is not my career. I have been freelancing for a very long time. I have another whole career life, so to speak. But this is the one thing that has sustained me through all kinds of things: military life, going to school, getting married, all of those things coming together and me telling stories. So, one of the things that I struggled with as a challenge is separating my best personal stories to put them in books and in articles and contests and things like that. I want to be able to tell the same story, but in different ways, because eventually I hope to do a memoir, and I don't want those stories to already have been published. And so that's where I'm kind of struggling, like making the determination about how really to separate the ones I want to talk about and the ones I want to be unknown, so to speak, because of the memoir.
Well, Pamela, that's a question right in my wheelhouse because I myself have been working on memoir and some of my stories have been out there. So I've also interviewed a ton of people who've written memoir, like top memoirists like Abigail Thomas and Joanna Rakoff and Christy Tate. And a lot of times people in their book say, stories originally appeared so and so, but it's been changed or adjusted for the memoir. They use some other kind of verbiage, but the
Right.
idea is you can take a story that's been published and you can rejigger it,
Mhm.
especially to fit in the memoir. It's not going to just be a beginning, middle, and end like a story usually is or an essay is, but it will have some more of a connection to the rest of the pieces in the memoir, whether it's a memoir and essays or something that just kind of follows more of a linear or chronological fashion. And so you will be adding additional information. It just will happen. You'll be adding some insight, you'll be adding some perspective that wasn't in the original piece. So I wouldn't stress so much about that. I think what's more important when you're doing personal stories that you're going to put in memoir is figuring out the thread of your memoir and figuring out the through line, which is something, a theme or an idea that's going to be followed through. And I recently did a webinar on this for Writer's Digest, where I talked about the different kinds of through lines. There's reclamation of self, there's something having to do with family cultural background and identity, and there's transformation. And
Mhm.
then it's finding the metaphors and the ways that you can pull it throughout the different areas of the book to kind of keep it a unified theme. Christy Tate, who's been a guest on my program, had something about scoring a piece of pottery, that's what makes a piece of pottery work. It's sort of like the level of trauma that the pottery has gone through, and showing that is kind of akin to what she had gone through in her book Group, that she writes about going through group therapy and going through her own transformations. So it's finding different elements to add in to your memoir to keep it more cohesive. Does that make sense?
Absolutely makes sense. And I wanted to attend that session, but I was busy on that day and could not. So I'll keep my eye out for it in case it comes up again. But that makes perfect sense. And that's kind of what I've been, as we spoke in previous conversation, what I've been trying to do. And so I'll take those into consideration for how to help evolve into that
Yes.
through line.
And I will be doing another session, a webinar for Writer's Digest in October on memoir. I'll keep you notified. I'll keep everyone through my website notified about that. Okay, so writing personal stories seems to be more of a focus for you now, right?
Correct.
And what are your concerns about writing these personal stories?
Well, basically, I was doing a lot of service pieces, and they were stories about other people. And at some point, fairly recently, I decided that I was going to do personal essay. And so I've written a lot, but published a few because I just have always had a reservation about, putting the personal out there. Well, when I started combining the two, as I know that you mentioned in your TED Talk and in your book, where taking a topic and adding a personal element, or taking a personal element and adding a topic, that's kind of where I was working towards now. So, what I'm looking at is I'm real big on organizing and strategic planning and those kinds of things. And so looking at what kinds of strategies work well for submission and placement for personal essays, for one, and looking at some of the markets, the paying markets like contests and publications, anthologies, all of those, because
Right.
I haven't really done a lot of strategic planning in that area. Mine has always been in the other work.
I think that it's so important to have a feeling that you can rely on some source. And what I do for my students, for my Zoom classes, is I keep a list of places that are looking for personal essays. And I kind of keep that. That's part of one of the things they get for working with me on a smaller level, in our group classes. But I think one of the things you can do is create this for yourself. So you can go on Twitter or X, and you can go and see, put in the publication you're interested in. So like editors, comma, the cut, or editors from the cut. And then it'll come up that you'll see in the search editors from the cut posting about pieces or posting about what they're looking for. And you can follow them, and then you can see when they do a call for something. If you want to start your own Google document or your own document, you can put that in there. The other thing you can do is go to LinkedIn, and you can put in the names of publications in LinkedIn, and then you'll see editors. It'll come up with editors. You may not be following them or you may not be friends with them, but you could then get some names. And of course, you can go to anything that's print, you can see where a masthead is, and you can look that way. And online also has mastheads, and many publications have how to get published in them. So I would keep a running list of that. In terms of contests and anthologies, a great source is Poets and Writers. And of course, Writer's Digest, where I'm a contributing editor, has that as well. And so I think it's just making this list for yourself. I always tell my students to go to Chicken Soup for the Soul. They're online and they give a running list of every book topic that they're looking to cover stories in. So you could add that to your list. And I think if you have that and you can just go back to it, then you know where you can submit different things to. You could even do searches on Facebook, wherever it is on social media that you go, you can do a search there and then you can find out. It's a little bit of legwork, which is why I kind of help my students by doing it for them. But it's also an ongoing process. Magazines, unfortunately, are closing at an alarming rate. And if there are different columns, like for example, the episode column for the New York Times recently shuttered, and the Old Family Ties column shuttered. The only one really that's up for writers to submit at the moment is Tiny Love Story and also Modern Love. So they're Google documents of how to submit, and it's just really an email. But there's lots of information out there. And I think it's just accumulating that information and then knowing you're not going to panic. When you have a story, you're just going to go to your list and then you're going to see where, you possibly want to submit it to.
Okay. I do have that kind of running list. So I will kind of go back and see about renewing, refreshing, and those kinds of things. What would be submission strategy? Again, thinking just the strategic planning aspect,
Yeah.
is that really any different from what I might be doing for my current writing for a personal essay?
I would say for personal essay, you want to submit to places that allow simultaneous submissions because it's kind of like otherwise the burden is on the writer, right? They submit somewhere they don't know. The person might get back to them, might not get back to them. You just never know. And so now you're waiting weeks, months. So most places today, unless they're very specific, like they do not take simultaneous submissions, they will be okay with it, I believe. What editors want to know is if somebody has accepted your piece. They want to know that because why? It takes away time from them if they're taking time to look and you've already been accepted somewhere else. So it's just like one of these etiquette courtesy things. I would say that there are some places, like you may have great stories for opinion pieces, and you can go to the opedproject.org and you can find a list of, places to submit. New York Times now has a very strict separation between church and state, meaning if you write an opinion piece, you can't write for the well. You can't write for another part of the publication. It used to be you could write opinion, you could write all different things. So that's one thing to keep in mind. So if you want to do opinion pieces, I would also keep a listing of places like the Independent and, of course, the Washington Post and LA Times that you can do opinion pieces in. Often newspapers are really a great source for that. In terms of submission strategy, I would say that go with what compels you the most, what's really shouting out to you to be heard. And that's where you're going to feel the most emotional energy to work on. Back in the day, I used to submit to like 30 publications at a time. And I just really kind of tweaked it for each publication. For example, I had a story about my husband and how I had broken my fifth metatarsal when I went to meet his family. And I submitted it to all different places and with all different kind of focuses. One was a more psychological focus. It was for a then at the time Medium publication, which is now defunct. So it's good it didn't get published there. And another time it was focused like in a more funny vein. And then I heard about Yahoo Beauty was looking for pieces. So I made it more of a beauty focus. And so there are ways, if you know the publication, to kind of make sure that it's focused towards how they want the pieces to go while still telling your story. And so if I'm going to use that in my memoir, I would change it. It would no longer be the beauty focus that I had. It would probably be more of a psychological focus or a cultural focus.
Okay. So it's helpful to hear what it sounds like I'm hearing from you is that really the same strategies that you use in one area can really be used in all the areas. It's like transferable skills, so to speak, when you start talking about your resume. You focus on what that type of writing or type of publication would like, but as far as planning and strategizing, it really just is the same but applied in a different area. There's no secrets to doing it differently.
Yeah, I don't know about secrets. I think it's strategy, and I think it's kind of knowing your strength and going with your strength. I mean, secrets could be like how to find editors' names, or how to find contact information. I have some of that in my book. Go to Rocket Reach is one place. I think it's rocketreach.co or Muck Rack, and you can find editors' names. But I think LinkedIn, using LinkedIn to get editors' names is a strategy that I haven't seen a lot of before. And I think that in terms of stories, it's really just finding the venue that you want to be published in. And then if you know, for example, that you want to be published in a certain place, I would do a deep dive. And again, you've written a lot of service pieces, so you understand about service journalism, do a deep dive into finding everything you can about the place that you want to publish in. If you're not sure, that's where to look at the big lists from Poets and Writers or Duotrope. That's a little bit more literary focus, but that might be another venue. Like maybe you have a story that's right for The Sun, or River Teeth, Kenyon Review. So again, it's like looking at all those different venues and then just narrowing it down and kind of putting your ear to the ground. Like you could set up a Google alert for an editor or for a publication. That's one of the things you can do. You can ask AI about it today. I mean, I've talked
Yeah.
about AI. I'm going to talk more about it, but it's kind of funny. There's a disconnect in the industry because people are saying don't use AI, and yet every company out there is
Mhm.
contracting with AI.
Right,
Google just did a big AI acquisition. I believe in living in the real world.
right,
We're not asking AI to write our whole book. That would be ridiculous. We're not asking them to write our pieces, but we are using it as a tool to get information. And in fact, Google did this because I'm now asking AI rather than Google to help me figure out the best recipe for pasta. That has nothing to do with writing, actually, but this is now ways that we're using it.
right. Agreed. I think that AI also offers a great way to brainstorm ideas because for me, when I read things, it gets my idea juices flowing. And so if I'm looking for something specific, just wanting to brainstorm, and I ask AI and I get a list of something, that just helps me go off in a whole different direction on something else. So I think the uses for it obviously are good. It's really important as writers to make sure that we're using it in ways that it's not writing for us, but providing us with ideas or brainstorming or lists of things that exist that we might need in order to work on a project or something of that nature. So I totally agree.
Exactly. Good. So tell me some of the other challenges that you're also looking at.
Well, I think one thing for me is I feel like I'm a slow writer when it comes to processing ideas. I'm on different social media and I hear people that they're doing all these pitches. I can't, really go through pitches that fast because I put a lot of time into it. And I know I probably should move a little bit faster with the pitches, but that has always been something that is a challenge for me is to write pitches faster so that I could get more out there at once. But again, it's a little bit different when you're not doing it for your bread and butter. I'm doing it because I just love to write. So I'm not worried about being able to make ends meet as a result of not being able to write fast enough.
Right. So you have that luxury, you're not compelled to have to do it. So you want to do it because
Want
it's a
to.
great outlet for you.
Correct, and not my full-time job, and that's
Yes.
really the difference. It's not my full-time job. I have a
Yes.
full-time job. It's just the love of writing.
Yes. And you're not the first person who's told me this. So this is a different way of approaching it. I would say if you want to write pitches faster, a pitch for me, the template of a pitch, and I talk about it and I give a lot of pitch examples, as you know, in Writing That Gets Noticed. And I also have some episodes on the podcast all focused on pitching, which you may be interested in listening to. But pitching for me, you start with always a compliment about the publication or something the writer, the editor's done. Editors are often writers themselves, and it's not a bad idea if an editor has written something, not even for their publication. You can say, I saw your piece in Elle, and I also admired the last piece you published in this publication, a topic that's been interesting to me because of blah, blah, blah. Then you go into, I have an idea for a pitch. Now, a title is always very helpful. So if you can, in your head, with whatever you want to say, kind of put a working title and you can tweak the title because a title will often grab the editor's attention. And if you can put it, when you're pitching, if you can put a compelling title in the subject line, that's a great way. When I pitched How to Bully-Proof Your Child to the New York Times, I put the title in the subject line. And I think that's one of the reasons the editor got back to me right away, because it was a compelling title and then the pitch has to support it. So you would have come up with the title. And then for me, for you, I think what would be helpful is to put it in a few sentences as if you were telling your best friend.
Mhm.
You have an idea. Hey, I have an idea about, I'm just making this up, being a military wife and the things that they should have told me that they didn't. Something like that, right?
Mhm.
And then she would probably say to you, "Oh, wow, that's interesting. What would be one of those things be?" And then you would say, "Oh, one of the things would be, etc." And
Right.
that would be the beginning part of your pitch. I've been a military wife for blah, blah years, and most people aren't aware of this. And this is one of the things I wish I had been told, because it would have changed something. Whether or not this is a real story, I don't know. And then you would say, I'd like to share additional examples of that. Maybe you're going to make it a service piece. So 10 things I wish I'd been told. Or maybe you're going to make it just a story, there's going to be some change or transformation. So where you ended up in a different place. With stories, usually you have to have the whole execution of it done, the personal essay. Some editors do want to be pitched before you submit the actual story, but a lot of them want to see the full piece, because with personal essays, it's much more in the execution, in how you share your words and how you craft your sentences. And so I would just have that little nugget. And since you don't have to be pitching all day long, I would do it in the notes section of my email. That's what I do a lot of times. I write pitch idea, and then I'll put the title, and then I'll just keep adding to it. So I'll do what I would be telling a friend or a girlfriend. And then if it's not going to be something that's just story, I would get into who your experts are going to be. So maybe there's a psychological angle to it. And so you're going to talk to a therapist. So I would say, I plan to speak to, and then you'd start putting in your experts. And so you
Mhm.
don't have to have the pitch right that moment, but you're going to have the bones of it. And you can do that for a lot of the ideas that you have. Do you want to share any of the ideas you have? And I can kind of give you a little input on that.
Really, I'm trying to figure out with personal essays where you wouldn't include necessarily experts and things like that, how it would differ in terms of pitching. Like you said, sometimes they want the full submission. And, for me, that would be great if I've already got something written. But then that makes me wonder with personal essays more than the service pieces, because I write those all the time. And I'd want to make sure I get out of the habit and really understand the difference of doing it with personal essays. So, with submissions, if they do accept submissions, how much, if they like the story, do they work with you editing it? Or, is it you better just already have it the way they want it? That kind of thing.
Back in the day, and I was in magazines in the 90s, editors would take a lot of time for stories, but I started out in print, and print you had a little bit more time. They called it Christmas in July.
Right.
So the pub dates were 6 months out. I think today editors are looking for pieces to be submitted tight in
Hmm.
terms of copy and story. And that's why a lot of times they want to see the essay before they accept it. I would make sure it's as tight a story as you can get it. It's not like the editor is going to jump in and really craft a personal essay with you, unless it's like a really big feature piece for the Atlantic or the Cut or something like that. So, most publications have like a 1,200, maybe 1,500 limit tops. A lot of publications have been actually downsizing the word count to like
Right.
800, 900 words. So, actually look and see. And sometimes I've even just counted the words on an essay that's been published just to reassure myself of what the actual word count is. So I don't
Mhm.
have to look ignorant with the editor.
Right.
And I would just make it as tight as possible. What I've noticed is that editors are often looking for a reported element in
Okay.
a personal essay. And that doesn't mean that it's a service piece that has like a lot of tips and tricks and things like that.
Mhm.
But what they want sometimes is maybe a quote or connection from like a new book about the topic or a study or some piece of research or information that elevates the idea in your essay. It's not always necessary, but sometimes it turns it to that extra oomph that makes the editor want to use it because it shows that there's interest in a broader way. Maybe keep that in mind, depending on the story that you want to write.
Right. Okay. And so then, assuming you have tightly written within the word count and good topic, do editors now still want to tweak? I mean, I don't have a problem with tweaking, but I'm just curious about whether if it's really good, but there's something about it that they want added
Yeah.
or recommend something being removed or changed, small tweaks.
Yes, I think a lot of editors will have no problem if they say, "Oh, can you add a little bit more about this in?" Like if you mention something about, I don't know, being adopted. I know you're not, but like, something
Right.
like that.
Right.
And then they may say, "Oh, can you give a few sentences about that
So
just
they
to
will.
provide context for the reader?" Or they may say, "This feels a little rushed. Can you dive into the ending a little bit more?" Those are the kind of edits that you might expect. Editors often want to maybe tweak the beginning
Mhm.
or the ending. The ending often needs to land with a real strong punch. And so sometimes they'll tweak, those last sentences. I know I do that a lot with my students. The beginning part needs to be really compelling. Of course, if an editor is taking your essay, they've found something compelling about it, or they wouldn't be taking it.
Mhm.
So usually your opening is fine. And I find that sometimes the middle can get bogged down in an essay and it can just have too much detail. And so a good editor will get rid of some of the detail and make sure that the story keeps flowing along.
Mhm.
But it's not going to be like a deep process where there's going to be like 5 or 6 edits back and forth. And you know that from working with sisters from AARP. How's the process with that?
Yeah. I'm fortunate to work with a great editor in Sisters from AARP. And she's very good about offering up suggestions. And I really like that because I'm very feedback oriented. I can really hear what a person is saying and then make tweaks based on that. Once I establish a relationship with an editor, then I can really keep that relationship strong. I just don't have a lot of different ones, right? And
Right.
so if I'm thinking about writing a third book and then shifting also into personal essays, then I want to be able to easily establish, new relationships as well, because I do value feedback and I'm pretty good at, like I said, at executing it.
I would say don't expect it in the beginning with
Yeah.
an editor. They usually just want to get the
Get
work
it and
done
go.
and get it out
Right.
the door and publish it. But what that does is it opens the door for you to pitch them again.
Right.
And as the relationship evolves, you can say, "Hey, we've worked together on these pieces. Do you have any suggestions? Do you have any feedback?" Some people are naturally feedback oriented, and so it might be easier, it might come faster. But other people, they have a lot on their plates and they just want to get it done. And I
Mhm.
think you'll be able to gauge as you work with people and keep, building those relationships because yes, they're so important to have.
Okay, good.
And you want to write a tiny love story, right? Did you tell me that?
I did. I mentioned micro memoir, tiny love story, and flash fiction as areas that I would look at in terms of writing the personal essays. I did.
I think that would be great for you because tiny love story is 100 words or a little less, but really most people need that 100.
100%. I'll
So,
use the 99, I'm sure.
and by the way, if you have more than 100 words, it will not go through the portal that you have to submit it in. So that's easy because you just won't get through. And I'll say that. So you need to make sure. It's a great way to test out a story that you're thinking of working on and making longer because you can always expand into something you're going to use for a book or something you're going to use as a personal essay. And so I would definitely start writing up these tiny love story ideas that you have
Mhm.
and submit them with photos. I talk about micro memoir in the book and I talk about tiny love story and I even share mine and a few other students' work. And so I think that that is definitely a great forum for you. And there are other places, 5 Minute Lit. And I think that's also 100 words. There's 100 words. It's called 100 words. And I mean, River Teeth, I think it's called Beautiful Things. It's like 250 words. And
Mhm.
that's more literary. So if you want to go in that vein, it's a little bit different.
Right. It will
But I think
definitely
it's a
venture into
great.
the longer pieces that I'm used to. I want to exercise muscles in personal essay writing that I am not using. So I think that would be a great idea.
It really is. It's less overwhelming also. A tiny love story has to have a beginning, middle, and end. It has to be like a mini essay. And what's fun about micro memoir is the type of things that might not work in a personal essay. You can use a text, you can use slang, you can use kind of unusual words and things like that. You can use unusual words in essay too, but it's a little bit more, getting that attention. You could use different ways of doing it. So it's fun. It's definitely fun. So this was great. I hope you found this helpful.
I did. I absolutely did. For me, it's always important to just, have that conversation with someone who's in something that you want to do or to do more of. And perhaps those things will help not be so hesitant and go ahead and do it a little faster and take a few more risks and those kinds of things, knowing that you're not really far from where you thought you might be, taking that next step. And so I've got a lot of really great and helpful things. I appreciate the time in making this shift for me into more development into the personal essay arena.
Well, this is great. Thank you so much for speaking with me and keep me posted on everything that's going on. And I really think you have a lot to uncover and to explore and to put together and keep writing those essays.
I sure will. Thank you so much, Estelle. I really appreciate your time.
Thanks so much, Pamela. Follow me at EstelleSErasmus.com on my website and on social media, which is Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter at Estelle S. Erasmus. And we're now on YouTube for Freelance Writing Direct. Follow along, and soon everyone will be reading what you're writing.